that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. Parlez-vous, present. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Glory, God, what our hearts long to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, there's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. Your presence, I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence. Father God, we enter your presence today. May your Holy Spirit just fall upon us. Wherever we are, God, may your Spirit fall heavy on us today. We love you, we praise you. Thank you for all things. Amen.
Father, send me. This is the prayer that the Church of the Nazarene has prayed from the very beginning, as she sent her people into the world. A world that desperately needs Christ's transformational love. Today, we are part of a global movement in which God is actively redeeming His creation, restoring the broken through His beautiful gift of salvation offered to all. We have been called to partner with Him in this movement. This is why Nazarene Missions exists, to share His love, compassion, and peace as we start new Nazarene churches around the world. Entire communities are being transformed through the partnerships and relationships developed by our local churches. Nazarene missionaries are partnering with local ministers and lay leaders to bring restoration, share the gospel, and build sustainability within these communities. As each church body is developed, Nazarene Missions provides ongoing resources that help the church be effective in ministry and outreach. Our partnership ensures that the local church has a collective and immediate impact, an impact that will last for generations to come. You and I are vital to this movement, a movement that is answering the call to make Christ-like disciples in the nations. This is only made possible through your prayer, your partnership, and your generous sacrificial giving. Nazarene Missions is a movement of God through the people of God.
One of the things that we want to do over the next couple of weeks is we're going to be focusing on missions. and more exclusively missionaries from around the world. And we wanted to give you updates on what's been going on around the world via missionaries and also with compassionate ministries. So my wife is going to come, Kelly's going to come here, and she's going to give you an update of compassionate ministries and what's going on around the world.
A lot of the questions we get when we start talking about updates with compassion is what's happening now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I wanted to just give a quick kind of summary of what we see happening going on in the world around us. First of all, the pandemic has made it very hard for missionaries to do what they're designed to do. They can't necessarily meet with people. Most of the compassion centers around the world are closed right now, so they can't help the children that they were originally there to do. Some of you that have sponsor children may be aware of this. You might have gotten an email that says from now on all your payments and all your correspondence have to be done online because they can't actually get to the kids and read the letters to them. And so a lot of it is just not really being able to get to where they need to be able to do the work that they would normally be doing. But that doesn't mean that we're not doing anything. Some of the other things we see happening around the world is much like what we see here in the US. Shutdowns, people not being able to go to work, which means they're losing their income. And in some areas of the world, that is absolutely devastating. We still have nice homes and at least some food to go home to. In some places, when they lose their job and income, they literally have nothing, not even clean water to drink. And so this leads to high levels of stress, mental instability. We also see it leading to a lot of unnecessary death due to medical issues that are not being treated, as well as a high level of things like child abuse. And so what NCM has been working on doing is kind of a two-stage program. Starting stage one is just getting those basic needs taken care of. Food, medical, different packets of hygiene and things like that they can get to people right away. And then phase two is going to be implementing some long-term resources and assistance programs. Right now around the world, everybody but Europe is still in stage one of that program. And so really what we're seeing right now is countries where the missionaries are relying on food packs, handing out some of those basic nutritional items, handing out medicine supplies, educational supplies for these kids that would normally be at the Compassion Center being educated and taken care of, but right now they're stuck at home. And so places like Sri Lanka, which has hardly anything when it comes to food and water supplies, that's their big effort, just getting those basic needs met and handing out those supply kits. Other parts are working on online training, providing resources and educational materials and anything that they can get through online programming to these people that need it. The numbers that we have right now for Peru, we have one of our Links missionaries in Peru. They're serving about 12,000 families with food and medical supplies. The current numbers for Sri Lanka is about 3,000. We also know that there's a couple hundred in Kenya and other African nations where they're trying to build up those food and medical educational supplies. Some of the other areas that we see different programs going on in Peru, there's actually a Nazarene district that is working on mental health resources. So they provide online, educational material for mental health. They also have weekly seminars that you can kind of log in and talk to somebody. In Africa, we had a program at some of our NCM centers that trained women in vocational skills, how to sew or make better meals and things like that. And these women have actually turned those skills that they were learning to provide for their own family into a means of community support and income. They're selling masks that they sew to hospitals. They're cooking meals for entire communities that are near them. And so they're actually taking a lot of that stuff that they learned just to help their own children and turning that into a bigger project to help out people in need. One of the other things that we're seeing is something called the safety awareness. I know this is happening in the Philippines and a few other of those island nations where they're going to over 2,000 homes, providing them with resources that talk specifically about how to keep children safe. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because of the mixed audience that might be watching this, but it basically has to deal with online, I don't know how you say that, exploiting of children, I guess is an easy way to say it without going into some of the details. One of the big things, though, that we see happening with the compassionate ministries right now is that we can't always get the supplies in and out of countries, get things to the people that need them. And so they've really been relying on people giving cash donations, because then they can mail that directly to the areas that need it and then, buy the supplies right there in their own community, which helps with the local economy. And it also makes sure that those people are getting exactly what they need without having to worry about the shipping and the customs and all of those sorts of things. We actually did have the June magazine for NCM. If you don't get them, if you're not on that list, we have a few copies here at the church. You can just call, let us know, and we'll make sure that you get one. That's all about what NCM is doing right now around the world in some of these areas that are hit hard by the COVID-19. We'll also have some more information coming in August when we get back together. Our district is working on 2 projects for the coming year. We're going to be raising money to help with the food and water sanitation program in Peru. We're also going to be working on that child safe, helping to raise some of the money and materials needed to continue that awareness of what's happening to these children when they're at home and they're being exploited because their family needs some form of income, and that's just how it ends up working. So the awareness of how to keep them safe, educate them on the problems with those sorts of activities. You can also go to ncm.org. They have a whole list of blogs and videos that you can look at for some of these different programs and some of the efforts that they're doing around the world. But in general, you'll see most regions are asking for prayer. The African region specifically is looking for prayer for food resources and the needs of the hospital. If the outbreak gets any worse there, they're not going to have the right resources to be able to treat people. So in general, just the containment of the outbreak, better awareness of sanitation and how to keep everybody safe. In Asia, specifically, they're looking at issues of the human trafficking and general kind of context of prejudice and some of the things that are going on there. And then Central and South America, again, is looking specifically at the food resources, the distribution, especially since a lot of the countries have been hit with natural disasters recently. It's very hard for them to grow and maintain food crops. So again, if you want more information, you can contact the pastor. We'll get that information to you. There will be more information coming from our district mission council in August when people start getting back together. But prayer is always one of the best things that we can do right now to help out.
Thank you, Kelly. As she said, we want to use July as a time to just focus ourselves in prayer. A lot of people are hurting, not just in the United States, but all over the world. So as we focus ourselves on missions this month, please join us in prayer as we pray for those who are suffering from this need.
The Church of the Nazarene is one of the largest missionary sending denominations in the world. Even before the Church of the Nazarene was formed in 1908, a global outreach program had already begun. The vision to prayerfully send missionaries into the world with Christ's transformational love was woven into the fabric of our identity as holiness people. To fulfill our mission to make Christ-like disciples in the nations, Nazarene Mission sends missionaries where they are needed most, to partner with local ministers and lay leaders to bring restoration, share the gospel, and build sustainability within the community. Nazarene missionaries are Christ-like disciples, called to participate in the movement of the Holy Spirit to transform the world. In the Church of the Nazarene, there are two types of missionaries, a sponsored missionary and a global missionary. A sponsored missionary is primarily funded by their local community and called to serve a localized need in the field. They are affirmed by their local church, district, and the Church of the Nazarene, and will serve a maximum of 4 years in the field. A sponsored missionary is not required to have previous ministry experience, but they play an important ministry role on the field. A global missionary is primarily funded by the global efforts of world evangelism and called to serve up to a full career in the field. They are affirmed by the Church of the Nazarene and have prior ministry experience. A global missionary strategically serves a global assignment wherever they are needed in the world. The Nazarene missionary sending model is a system designed for nurturing, sending, and supporting Nazarene missionaries. This model walks with missionaries, guiding them from their call to application, through their training, to their placement and deployment in the field. As Nazarene missionaries serve on the field, the model continues to support their ministry through world evangelism giving and through deputation. When a missionary completes their service on the field, the missionary sending model supports each missionary on their return. Nazarene missionaries play a vital role in the work of missions around the world. They are set apart to do God's work to spread His transformative gospel. Jesus said, "As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." Nazarene missionaries are answering this call through the support of the Church of the Nazarene.
Well, greetings in the name of the Lord. We're going to continue to worship today. To God be the glory. Are you ready, Stevie? Thumbs up. Like But when we all get to heaven, sing the wonders of Jesus, and His grace in the risen bride and blessed still remember us the land. We all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. We all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. While we walk the pilgrim path, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow, not a sigh. We all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. We all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Let us be true and faith, trusting, serving, and reigning. Just one glimpse of Him in glory, fill us all like a day. We all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. We all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Honor to the prize before us, to His beauty will behold. Soon the pearly gates will open, we shall tread His gold. We all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. We all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Amen. Good morning. Today we are going to have a special speaker. We were able to get the missionaries from the Kissimmee Church of the Nazarene interviewed Scott and Emily Armstrong a few weeks ago while COVID was still taking place. We were able to get some of that footage, and we're going to put it together in a worship packet for you today. We're really encouraged by some of the things that they said. There's also to follow, we're trying to get a YouTube video that Emily Armstrong sent. Scott and Emily Armstrong are global missionaries and ordained elders in the Church of the Nazarene. They've been ministering in the Mesoamerica region since January 2004 and have lived in the country of Guatemala, Costa Rica, and Panama. Their son Elijah was born May 2003 and was 7 months old upon their arrival in the mission field. Their daughter Sydney was born in Guatemala and on February of 2005. Currently living in San Domingo, Dominican Republic, Scott and Emily are coordinating the ministries of Mesoamerica Global Mission and Mesoamerica Genesis, as well as overseeing the construction of the new Career Center of Missionary Formation, which is being built on the campus of the Dominican Nazarene Seminary. They especially enjoy ministering with children, youth, and young adults as they discern God's call to the mission in their life. And we pray that God's blessing upon you as you watch what Scott and Emily have to tell us. Thank you.
I'm Emily, and he's Scott, just so that we can get that clear. And we do have two children. Not even kids. They wouldn't like us to call them kids. They're teenagers. Our son Elijah is going to be 17 in May, and our daughter Sydney is just turned 15. And we are excited to be a part of what's called the Mesoamerica region. Just to refresh our memories on what Mesoamerica is it's Mexico all the way through Panama, all of the Caribbean nations, and then there's 3 nations in South America that belong to us as well. So all of the discovering and developing of new missionaries, thinking about urban church planting, the training of missionaries, it covers over 32 nations. It's things that we get to think about, that God gets to stretch our minds in every day. And we were thinking about the time that we had to share with you all. And typically when we would do a home assignment message, we would try to pull some of those stories that God's been doing over the past year or the past 2 years and bring it to show what God's been at work doing in these countries. And as we sat and thought about what we were doing right now, we thought, well, this whole entire thing is different. The world is different. We need to create something just a little bit different as well. And as we started thinking about it, God really laid a very specific message on our heart for tonight, something that we're excited to share with you because our world has changed. Our missionary world has changed. We are not doing things the exact same way, but we're also not just sitting back and sitting in our recliners and waiting for the world to pass us by and so we can get back going. So we wanted to share with you that in the Church of the Nazarene around the world, there are no work and witness teams that are traveling through June 1st. That affects our ministry because when you heard about the Center of Missionary Formation, a part of that is construction of buildings. We had quite a few teams that we had to cancel and teams are still thinking about, should I come in the summer? Should I come in the fall? Those are things that affect us as missionaries. We've also had to cut all of our travel. And that started about 4 weeks ago when we got a letter from the Global Missions Director that just said, because the world is in such chaos right now, before all of the travel restrictions were truly put in place, we started to put travel restrictions because we travel so much as missionaries. And so we had to cancel airline tickets. We had to cancel events. We had to continue to move forward with planning and figuring out what God was doing. But then even in our home, things have changed. Our kids are in online schooling, just like a lot of you all are. They're in an international school, and a couple of their schools that they have as a part of that international school is in Spain and in Italy, and they were starting to see the effects of COVID over in those other countries before it came to the Dominican Republic. And so the day that the Dominican Republic said that they would not go to school again, they were ready to pick up with online schooling. So the world has changed, missions has changed, our family has changed, and we definitely thought that gave us a good opportunity to say, let's change a little bit about how we do deputation speaking.
All that said, imagine when I received an image from a fellow missionary about 3 weeks ago. And it was at 11 o'clock at night. I know I shouldn't have checked my phone, but I did. I'm kind of glad on this one that I did. And I checked it. This image looked official. This image had the logo of the Church of the Nazarene, had the logo of NMI, Nazarene Missions International. And guess what it said? I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm going to read here. It said, notice, by decree of the Board of General Superintendents, all missionary activity has been stopped until further notice. Well, that sounded very interesting, especially since that was not the message we were getting from our superiors. I thought, this is fake news. Who does this? But then I looked at it again and it looked really official. The next day, because she was already sleeping as a good person is, right? The next day, I told her, I said, what is going on? I sent it to our coordinator of NMI on the region. And I just said, just checking. I mean, there's no way this is real. It was not. And we ended up spending a little bit of that day just debunking that, basically telling our region, we don't know if you've received this or if this is the concept that people have, but that's not the case. Imagine we have had to be creative. We have had to change different things, but to say that all missionary activity has been stopped, that is not correct. Does the Great Commission stop because of COVID-19? Does the Great Commission stop because of church persecution in many of our countries? No, is the answer to both of those. And so, although we are confined, many of us, to the house, although things have changed quite a bit, although we have had to cancel some trips, we have talked with a lot of our missionaries and the people that work, under us or with us, and we've said, listen, we've got to be creative, but the missionary activity of the Church of the Nazarene is still vital, is still ongoing. And so it kind of reminded me actually of John chapter 4. John chapter 4, if you guys remember, is, Jesus and the woman the Samaritan woman at the well. And we kind of have three perspectives here. I could talk about Jesus and the Samaritan woman and their perspectives, right? But really, I want to focus on the perspective of the disciples versus the perspective of Jesus. Verse 27 of chapter 4 says this. John 4:27. Just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" Then, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, "Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" They came out of the town and made their way toward him. Now, this is the part that I really want to focus on. Meanwhile, his disciples urged him, "Rabbi, eat something." I mean, that's the whole point of us going into the town. Come on, we brought you food. But he said to them, "I have food to eat that you know nothing about." Then his disciples said to each other, "Could someone have brought him food?" And he says, "My food," said Jesus, "is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work." Listen to this next verse. This is kind of the key verse of the evening here. "Don't you have a saying, 'It's still 4 months until harvest'? I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest." Amen. Oh man, like literally that jumps out at me because I have heard people, even, ministers and other people in leadership that have just said, "Oh, after we get out of this in about 4 or 5 months, man, we'll be able to kind of get going again with missions. We'll kind of get going again with reaching our community, and we'll do all these different things." And I think of this verse and I say, we are missing it if we think that it's just kind of biding our time and maintaining what we have and just kind of woe is me. If we don't view these 4 months, I don't know if they're going to be more or less, I'm not sure. But if we don't view these weeks or these months as harvest, what are we doing? The harvest continues. The missionary activity of the church still continues. And this is kind of what we want to talk to you about. We're going to share a few stories of just kind of what that's looked like in the last month.
One of the things we immediately did when we heard that all of this is starting to come down is we started to get in contact with the two teams that we have out in the field that are serving in the urban city of Xela and of Monterrey. And Xela is in Guatemala, and there's a team of 4 young people that are there. And one is from the Dominican Republic, one is from El Salvador, one is from Guatemala, and one is from Mexico. And I would say if I had to think about, I haven't done the math, but if I had to think of the average age of the team of missionaries that's there right now, they're about 24 years old, probably 24, 25 years old. And so pretty quickly, we were getting some information from them that Guatemala was one of the very first countries in our region that started to close its borders. So they really started to restrict the public transportation as well. And those missionaries were telling us, we've been in the community. They were deployed in October of 2019. So they're right at about, 5 or 6 months. And typically when we see in the Genesis ministry, things really start to happen. It's right around that 6-month mark. It's because they've been in the communities. They know the neighbors. They've really started to create some traction in the programs that they're doing. And they were really discouraged because they said, we can't even go out. Like public transportation is non-existent. They don't own their own cars. They don't have a bicycle, or they can always walk, obviously. But the quarantine had been placed that they could not leave their houses. And they just were really looking for some ideas. And so Scott said, "Hey, let's talk." And he called and he chatted with them. And through the course of even talking with them, they told us a story. And Scott was like, "This is what you need to hold on to. And this is what continues to push you through these days." They had told us that on March 13th, which was just days before all of this happened, that they had been involved in something that we call Maximum Mission on our region. And Maximum Mission is basically just an opportunity for a local church to get engaged in short-term missions. It could be a 2-day event, a 3-day event, but it's to get out of your community and into somebody else's community. They are involved in evangelism and discipleship and community projects. And what was interesting to me about this Maximum Mission is the missionaries that were assigned to this Genesis site said, we have got 3 different communities that we're working in, and we're going to invite people that we've been working with that don't even really know Jesus as Savior yet, but they're interested. We're going to invite them to go serve. We're going to invite them to go evangelize. We're going to invite them to go and disciple people. And so one of those people was William. And William's an adolescent. I think he's like 12 or 13 years old. And he had been alongside them for a couple of weeks already. And when they went to do the Maximum Mission in that community, he was involved in things that he had never thought about before. He was serving other people. And through the course of hearing the evangelistic message time after time after time, he came to the missionaries at the end of that day and he said, I think I want to ask Jesus into my heart. I think I want to be a Christian. And they were telling us that, we've got this wonderful contact, William. He's just asked Jesus to be a savior, but now we don't know what to do. And so Scott said, well, what are the things you can do? What are the things that you can continue to reach out? Does he have a cell phone? Is he involved in Messenger? Is he on Facebook? Is he on Instagram? How can you connect with him? And they said, well, yeah, we can do that. And I just heard about 2 weeks ago, probably, they sent an update letter to us, and they said that William is one of the people that has been growing most in his relationship with Jesus right now, because they have had so much time to dedicate to William, and because he's had so much time to just receive what God's been pouring into his life. And it's been exciting for us to see that even though it's different, we would love to go and sit in William's living room with him, which is the way we typically do it, and open up the Bible with him, that he's learning that I can be a self-feeder, that I'm learning that he's learning that God loves him even in the midst of this thing that we call crisis, and that God will always be there. So the mission has not stopped in Shayla, and the missionaries are being creative, and they are trying to do things in new ways, and God is proving faithful.
Another story is just kind of with our existing churches in our region. I remember just a couple weeks ago, we were getting ready for the World Evangelism Fund offering. And, that is the biggest offering of our year as a Church of the Nazarene for WEF, for the World Evangelism Fund. So it's Easter offering. And so we're getting ready for that. And I remember a leader from our region kind of contacted me and was just discouraged and said, man, I've gotten some backlash from some other people saying some people have lost their jobs, and some of our people in our churches are really not doing very well. They're wondering if we should just kind of just not publicize the World Evangelism Fund offering and the Easter offering this year. And she says, I'm not really comfortable with that, but what do you think? And I said, oh, well, I think we should absolutely continue to give people the opportunity to give. This is part of us being Christian, part of our generosity. It doesn't matter what we have or what we don't have. In fact, I told this person, I said, you know what? Reminds me a little bit of 2 Corinthians 8, when Paul is talking to the Corinthian church, but he's bragging on the Macedonian church. I don't know if that would work today, right? Like talking with the first church and being like, you guys don't know what's going on. Second church really is more generous than you, right? But that's kind of what they were doing. That's kind of what Paul was saying. He's saying, listen, you guys have given. Yeah, thanks for that. But do you know there's this church? The churches in Macedonia are giving, and it's out of their scarcity, out of their poverty that they are giving. And so I told this leader, you know what? I think we should still promote it. God still needs to fund the mission. God still needs us to believe there is still a mission in this time. And even giving is one of the things that we can do still, and it may look a little different. In fact, I told this person, I said, you know what? Here's the way we're doing it. We do not have online giving. That kind of makes me laugh when I think about that for our congregation. We can't do it. It's just not contextualized here for us. But you know what we're doing? We're like, hey, everybody, here's an envelope. And on this envelope, do you know what this says? I know it's inverted for you guys that are seeing it, but it says FEM. Fondo de Evangelismo Mundial, World Evangelism Fund. So we have another one that says tithes, another one that says offerings. I said, every family, get your envelopes and just, put in your offering. There will come a time in several weeks from now when we'll be able to come back in and we will bring our tithes and offerings and even our Easter offering. Who knows if Pentecost will have passed by that point. But we will still bring our Easter offering, and we will just have this huge celebration. And I think everyone has caught that. All of our local churches have kind of gotten that idea. Wouldn't you know it? A few days later, I got an image, a much better image than the first one I had gotten a few weeks earlier. But this image was more official, and for that district and that country where the leader that I had talked with was. It said Easter offering, and it basically had some different announcements there. But the verse that they had used was 2 Corinthians 8:5, and it basically said that out of your scarcity, out of their poverty, they have given in overabundance. Wow! I thought maybe this conversation, just a simple conversation, can just get our existing churches to realize, even during this time, this is a time for harvest. This is a time for giving. This is a time still for generosity.
In the last story that we want to tell you, it rings totally true with what we just read in that passage, that Jesus was still on mission. Even though he was standing at the well with the Samaritan woman, he had something to complete. And I think as the Nazarene church, that's something that we need to remember, that this is not a period of time that God did not know was going to happen. The things that he was asking us to do simply 6 months ago have not changed. God's mission is still what he desires to accomplish in this world. And we had a reminder of that in our own local church. We planted a church that we started about 5 years ago here in Santo Domingo, and we were teaching missionaries how to plant an urban church, but we had never done it ourselves. And so God gave us the opportunity to take in a leadership role, and so we decided that this is something we were going to jump into. And I remember probably about 4 or 5 years ago, it was really close to the beginning of the journey with planting the church, that I met a woman named Selenia. And we were meeting in a classroom, not a classroom, in a school, a small school. I know when I say school in the United States, like we think about these huge campuses, but a very small school that we were meeting in, and we were actually on the patio area. And we had our chairs set out, our plastic chairs set out in a circle, because we were going to have our Wednesday evening Bible study and prayer time together. And her husband had been a part of our church for many months, and was even a part of what we would consider the core group that was starting that church. And she came and she said her name was Selenia. And I remember talking to her and saying, well, tell me just a little bit about your story. I know your husband, but we've never met. And she said, I've got 3 children and I'm a teacher, and I really need to get my life back in line with Jesus. And she said, I need to find him, and I know that's something that he's calling me to. And we sat in that circle, and I just encouraged her to continue to seek God, and that God was going to meet her right where she's at. Remember, this is 5 years ago. And Selenia started her journey with Jesus again about 5 years ago. And she came through some classes of discipleship with us, and she got to the point that she wanted to be baptized. She really had found faith in God, and she was growing in her faith. And she had gotten to the point where when you think about the parable of the sower, I really think that her life is what we would consider like her life of the seed had fallen on rocks. Because that root had taken root, it really had, but there were rocks that she had just not taken out of her life. And as things started to get hard for her, she really stopped trusting who Jesus was. She stopped attending services with us. Even when we reached out to her, she didn't want really a whole lot to do with us anymore. And so we just kind of left her in God's hands, and we said, God, you've been at work in Selenia's life, and we just really pray your blessing upon her. And fast forward to 5 years later, in March of 2020, and we are in the middle of all of this pandemic with COVID-19, and it was really the beginning of when it was starting to outbreak here in the Dominican Republic. And our church for quite a few years has had a WhatsApp chat, and WhatsApp is something that is basically just a messenger system, and you can put tons of people onto it. I think you could put like 250 people on one group chat, and there are days when that group chat just explodes with information. There's days when it's completely quiet, right? But Selenia has been a part of that chat for years. But I totally forgot that Selenia was a part of that chat. She had not been engaged in anything. She never commented on anything. I'm sure I kind of thought she had left the group many years ago, but she was there because one day she put a comment in it and she said, we need to seek the Lord in this time, or something like that. And I remember thinking, Selenia? Like, where did Selenia come from? What is going on? And as a local church, we had to think of some strategies that did not revolve around just online Sunday school class, online services, because almost half of our congregation is not connected to an internet source. And so as we started to talk with our leadership about, well, how do we continue to stay connected? We can be the church wherever we are, but how do we stay connected as a body? And one of our leaders said, what we could do is we could assign a devotional. Every day, we want one of our church leaders to give a 2-minute audio devotional, not text, not something that they're just putting in with the text, but that they literally would give an audio, which you can do on WhatsApp pretty easy. Everybody knows how to do it. And so we started doing that just about 2 weeks ago, probably. And I tell you, probably about 10 days ago now, Selenia was listening to those devotionals, and she gave a tremendous testimony that she was finding God in this time of crisis, and that she had reconciled her life to who God was. She was receiving all of this information that we were putting in the church chat, and she was saying how God was the one that was her rock, and God was the one that was her refuge, and she wanted to be able to know him more. And I was so surprised but excited at the same time. And I remember a few days after her testimony, I sent her a text message just on a private side, and I said, Selenia, I'm so excited about what God's doing in your life. I said, I can tell through the words that you're using that God is real to you, that he has come alive to you in these days in a way that he didn't 4 years ago. I said, is there something that I can pray about with you? Is there something that I can come alongside you and just continue to pray with you? And she said, I realize that Jesus is who he needs to be, but I've got 3 kids that I don't think would say that. She said, would you pray that my kids start to know who Jesus is too? In using the passage that we just read about the Samaritan woman, it makes me think of Selenia has already turned into that woman, right? Because what happened in that story was that the woman had a Christ encounter, and she immediately started to become the evangelist. She said, you have to know who this Jesus is. I have met the Messiah. And Selenia's heart, even though it's growing in her own faith, has already been opened up to say, but I want other people to know this too. And that is so exciting for us to know that the harvest, we don't wait for the 4 months, because God's harvest is right now, and we can already see it through people just like Selenia.
We've talked about William. We've talked about our own churches and NMIs giving. We've talked about Selenia. And now we just kind of want to close, and we're going to close with a video. Now, this video, just to tell you, kind of came about as we were talking with our former missionaries that we've sent. We haven't even really explained our ministry completely, but we're part of a ministry that's called Genesis, bringing a new beginning. That's where the word comes from, in the urban centers, in the cities, big cities of our region. And one key way that we do that is by sending out missionaries. So we're just talking with everybody, and some were disappointed and discouraged in this time, and some were just like really confused. Like, I still am passionate about what I'm doing, but I have no clue what I'm doing. Like, how do we do it? How do we engage in mission in this weird time, right? And then, there were others that started to kind of go back and forth. We came up with an idea of just creating a video. So we kind of all wrote this script, and we polished it a little bit. And, it's not completely professional. But we can say that one of our guys, Gary Fawcett, who's a retired guy from California, who's just been like just giving member care to all of these missionaries, kind of as a dad. He and his wife, Naomi, are kind of the parents for these young Genesis missionaries, right? And he loves making videos, so he's just like, send them all to me. I was like, do you know what you're getting into? And so we sent him all these different videos from different contexts, all of us in our homes. And I think we want to share that video as kind of the final way to just give you the message that is now being implanted in our hearts, and we want to be imprinted in your hearts. So here it is.
Hola, mi nombre es Scott Armstrong. Soy de Santo Domingo, República Dominicana, y soy misionero nazareno ministrando con Génesis.
En este tiempo peculiar, la mayoría de nuestros templos están vacíos debido al virus COVID-19.
Pero la iglesia sigue hacia adelante.
Todavía estamos en misión.
Hoy estamos a distancia.
Pero desde nuestras casas
seguimos orando.
Seguimos adorando.
Seguimos compartiendo su palabra.
Seguimos yendo a la iglesia. Todavía estamos en misión.
Estamos discipulando a nuevos convertidos por video.
We're dreaming and strategizing of how to better reach the city.
We're preparing ourselves for revival.
God is moving now in the world, in us.
En nosotros. En nosotros.
Todavía somos la iglesia.
Los primeros discípulos enfrentaron persecuciones,
incluso el martirio. A pesar de todo esto, ellos triunfaron.
Ellos cumplieron con su tarea.
Y nosotros también cumpliremos con nuestra tarea.
Triunfaremos. Romanos 8:37 dice:
¿podrán separarnos del amor de Jesucristo?
Nada ni nadie.
Ni los problemas, ni los sufrimientos,
ni las dificultades.
Tampoco podrán hacerlo el hambre, ni el frío, ni los peligros, ni la muerte.
Estamos viviendo un tiempo de victoria y no de derrota.
Un tiempo de fe y no de miedo.
Así que este es nuestro tiempo, iglesia.
En medio de todos nuestros problemas, estamos seguros de que Jesucristo, quien nos amó, nos dará la victoria total. Amén.
Estamos convencidos que Dios está con nosotros.
Estamos seguros de que Dios nos protege.
Y sabemos que Dios nos ama.
Todavía somos la iglesia. Todavía estamos en misión.
So grateful for the call that you have called us to. So grateful that our sins are washed away. That we are rescued, that we are saved. all that you've done in our lives.